Radio, the beginning. Radio began long before any of us were born. The frequencies that radio uses to operate on are as old as Alpha, the beginning of this universe. It took man many years to learn how to use those frequencies to make radio signals. In the very beginning of radio, he didn't even know how to transmit his own voice. He was reduced to dots and dashes. He wrote a letter code made up of those dots and dashes. It was called the Morse code. It was used first on telegraph lines strung along poles from coast to coast and under the ocean around the world. Then that code was embraced by radio as its main form of communication. Radio became the newer telegraph. The main difference between them was that radio didn't need wires to transmit from point A to point B. Radio could go instantly around the world from point A through Z and all points in between instantly. Throughout the world and the universe, these radio signals traveled and would tell of many stories of distress and drama, joy and triumph, major news events in progress. Radio was found to be indispensable. Most all ships and planes had wireless telegraph sets. But there were many who knew that radio could be so much more than dots and dashes, and they spent hours and hours, months and years unlocking the possibilities of transmitting the human voice through the air. Man's essence teleported to all parts of the world while he stood in just one small micron of space. And yes, at some point, in some experiment, voice was sent successfully wirelessly. It was crude. The voice very distorted, sounding more like static than human, but the voice was controlling the static. From there on, it was a race to improve the quality. Man had achieved one of the greatest dreams of civilization, wireless transmission of the human voice. The very first voice signals on the air were limited. It was called push-to-talk. The mic had a push-button switch on it. You listened, then pushed the button to talk. Transmissions were short and to the point. But somehow, as time passed, it seemed like radio kept showing up at more major world events. Major news stories started coming in by radio first. It would be hours, if not days, before newspapers would have it. And so the commercialization of radio continued. Broadcast stations now began to proliferate in major cities. These were much more than push-to-talk transmissions. These stations were on the air for hours and hours at a time, relaying the news of the day from around the world. The effect was magnetic in the truest sense of the word. By the time I was born in 1944, radio already had a long history of achievements. It now proudly stood its vigil, like a watchdog in the night, to warn others of approaching danger. And then it began to entertain the listening audience between the disasters and warnings. Yes, push-to-talk was gone. These babies were cooking. Music on radio was now commonplace, and people loved it. It was mesmerizing. People were connected to people around the world. And we found out that some people were very different than us. Radio was tremendous at painting visual word pictures.
Get it started. It's rising, and it's rising terrible. Oh.
It could take you there in an instant, wherever there happened to be.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special news bulletin from CBS World News. A press association has just announced that President Roosevelt is dead.
Radio just connected you to your town, to your state, to your country, to the world and beyond. Well, maybe now we are getting ahead of the story. So much for the radio overview. Let's get on with my radio dreams. Here are some basic facts we'll be dealing with in detail. I was bitten by the radio bug by 6 years old. My grandfather had been bitten by the same bug, and he helped me discover how to scratch it. I was radio broadcasting throughout the local neighborhood by 12. And you'll have a front row seat following the adventure, from 5 watts to 50,000 watts. And it's all documented on tape. This is a one-of-a-kind interactive documentary. which has taken a lifetime to produce. And it's dedicated to all children everywhere who have radio dreams.